A few months ago, I was sitting across from the SVP of corporate strategy at one of the largest retailers in the country. We were about 30 minutes into what was supposed to be a strategic planning conversation, and she stopped mid-sentence, leaned back in her chair, and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Saurabh, I'm exhausted." She wasn't exhausted from the meeting, she was exhausted from the AI use case treadmill. Here's what she described. Her team had spent the better part of 2 years identifying, prioritizing, piloting, and in some cases deploying AI use cases across the business. Demand forecasting improvements, markdown optimization, personalized email campaigns, chatbots in customer service. The list was long, and every quarter, instead of getting shorter, the backlog was getting longer. More business units were coming forward with their own AI asks. The data science team was stretched. The technology team was overwhelmed. And leadership was asking the obvious question, where is the value? Not one of the implemented use cases had moved the needle in a way that showed up meaningfully in the P&L. There had been some promising pilots, some efficiency gains on paper, but nothing that felt like transformation. Nothing that felt like they were becoming a different, better company because of AI. She looked at me and asked, "Are we doing this wrong?" And my honest answer was yes, but not in the way you think. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Retail Tales. This is the show where exclusively discuss all things AI across the retail value chain. I'm Saurabh, your host for the podcast. Today, I want to talk about something I believe is the most important strategic question for retail leaders in 2026. And it's not which AI use cases should we implement next. It's a much more fundamental question. What should work actually mean in an AI-first world? Let me explain what I mean by the use case problem first, because I think it's important to name it clearly before we talk about the alternative. When most retailers approach AI, they approach it the same way they've approached every other technology wave. They look at their existing processes, they identify pain points or inefficiencies, and they ask, can AI help here? That's the use case mindset. It's logical. It feels responsible. It's the way you build a business case for a CFO. But it has a fundamental flaw built in. It assumes the existing and underlying process is right. When you bolt AI onto an existing process, you're optimizing something that was designed for a world without AI. It was primarily designed for manual execution. With that approach, you're essentially making a flawed thing slightly better. And here's the compounding problem. You end up with dozens of these point solutions, none of which talk to each other, none of which create systemic change, and all of which require ongoing maintenance, governance, and human oversight. The ROI gets fragmented across so many small improvements that it never adds up to anything that feels transformational. That's the use case treadmill. You're running hard, but you're not moving forward. So, what's the alternative? I want to offer a different starting point. Instead of asking, how can AI help with this process? Ask, if I were designing this function, this role, this workflow, this decision from scratch today, knowing that AI can plan, reason, act, and learn autonomously, what would I actually build? That's a fundamentally different question, and it leads to fundamentally different answers. Let me give you a concrete example. Think about the job of a merchant, a category manager in a retail organization. Traditionally, that person's week looks something like this: pulling sales reports, reviewing inventory positions, checking in with vendors, making assortment decisions, responding to exceptions, sitting in planning meetings. A lot of information gathering, a lot of coordination, a lot of reactive decision-making. Now ask the question differently. If I were designing the merchant role from scratch in an AI-first world, what would this person actually do? The answer probably isn't spend 60% of their time pulling and analyzing data. The answer is probably something like this person sets strategy, builds supplier relationships, makes judgment calls in ambiguous situations, and acts as the ultimate arbiter of taste and brand identity. Everything else, the analysis, the monitoring, the exception flagging, the routine vendor communications, the initial scenario modeling, those can be done by AI. That's not a use case. That's a reimagination of work. And when you start from that place, when you ask what work should look like, you end up making very different choices about how you deploy AI. This is where agentic AI becomes the critical concept. Most of the AI that retailers have deployed so far falls into what I'd call the tool category. You give it an input, it gives you an output. A demand forecast, a product recommendation, a generated email, a flagged anomaly, these are valuable. But they're tools. They require humans to initiate, interpret, and act on every output. Agentic AI is different. An AI agent can plan, reason, take sequences of actions, use tools, and work autonomously across complex multi-step tasks that without a human initiating every step. Think about what that means in practice. An agentic AI system in merchandising doesn't just flag that a SKU is trending, it monitors the trend, cross-references inventory positions, checks supplier lead times, initiates a purchase order conversation, models the markdown impact of not acting, drafts a brief for the merchant on the decision they actually need to make, and escalates only when it hits a decision that requires human judgment. That is a fundamentally different level of capability. The difference between a tool and an agent is the difference between a calculator and a junior analyst. Both are useful, but one changes your operating model and the other doesn't. And that's the key insight I want to land here. Agentic AI isn't just a technology choice. It's an operating model choice. Okay, I know. You must be thinking to yourself, all that is fine. And I am also fully aligned with the overall construct. But is it really real? Can it be real? How can it be real? Let's do this. Let's walk through a few functional areas where this shift in thinking could produce dramatically different outcomes. Let's make it real. Let's look at merchandising and buying. The traditional model is where merchants spend enormous amounts of time on information synthesis and routine decisions. An agentic approach would have AI agents continuously monitoring sell-through, inventory health, competitive pricing, and trend signals across every SKU. The agents handle routine reorder decisions, flag exceptions that are outside defined parameters, and present merchants with a curated set of strategic decisions that actually require human judgment. The merchant's job doesn't disappear. It gets elevated. They're no longer doing the work of a junior analyst. They're making the calls that only they can make. Let's look at supply chain. Supply chain is arguably the richest domain for agentic AI in retail. Think about how many decisions get made daily across sourcing, logistics, warehouse operations, and last-mile delivery. Most of them follow rules and patterns. An agentic supply chain doesn't wait for a human to notice a disruption. It detects it. Models alternative routing scenarios, coordinates with carriers, communicates to downstream stakeholders, and executes within defined guardrails. The humans in the loop are setting strategy, managing exceptions, and making calls that involve trade-offs the agent isn't authorized to make on its own. Okay, how about customer experience? You know, customer-facing agentic AI is the one most people are starting to see. AI that can have a full customer service conversation, look up order history, process a return, escalate appropriately, and close the loop without human intervention for the vast majority of interactions. But the real opportunity goes deeper than service resolution. Imagine an agent that proactively manages the post-purchase experience, monitoring delivery signals, reaching out to customers before they have a problem, personalizing the next engagement based on the full context of that customer's relationship with the brand. You want one more? Let's look at store operations. This one may seem like it's early, but guess what? The trajectory is still very clear. Agents that monitor shelf compliance through computer vision, manage labor scheduling dynamically based on traffic patterns and task loads, handle routine vendor coordination, and surface actionable priorities to store managers rather than raw data. Store managers become strategists and coaches rather than administrators. In each of these cases, the question isn't which AI use case helps my existing process. The question is, what does this function look like when AI is doing the cognitive heavy lifting on routine work, and humans are focused on judgment, strategy, and relationships? Now let's talk about the actual operating model choices that come with this, because this is where the leadership conversation has to go. I've heard several leaders talk about or refer to human in the loop approach, and then there are a few that talk about human on the loop. Let me differentiate between the two because this is one of the most important distinctions in agentic AI design. Human in the loop means a human approves every action before the agent takes it. Human on the loop means the agent acts autonomously within defined parameters, and a human monitors and can intervene. The right answer depends entirely on the stakes of the decision, the maturity of the agent, and the reversibility of the action. Retailers need to make explicit choices about where each of these models applies. Early in an agentic deployment, you probably want more human in the loop. As trust is built and performance is validated, you migrate toward human on the loop for routine decisions. But the choice has to be intentional. It can't just happen by default. Then there's agent orchestration. As you deploy multiple agents across the business, they need to coordinate. A merchandising agent and a supply chain agent can't be making conflicting decisions. This is the orchestration problem, and it's both a technology and a governance challenge. Who owns the logic that arbitrates between agents? How do you avoid local optimization that creates system-level problems? These are operating model questions as much as they are technical ones. As you can probably already tell, the agentic operating model requires roles that don't exist in most retail organizations today. You need people who can design agent workflows. Think of them as process architects for AI systems. You need people who can define the guardrails and escalation logic, essentially the policy layer for autonomous decision-making. You need people who can monitor agent performance and detect drift. And you need leaders at every level who understand what their agents are doing and can have an informed conversation about where to expand autonomy and where to tighten control. And then, last but certainly of the most critical ones, if not the most critical one, is governance and trust. This is the one that I see most often underinvested. Deploying an agentic AI system without a robust governance framework is not a technology risk. It's a business risk. You need clear accountability for agent decisions. You need audit trails. You need explainability, at least at the level of why did the agent make this call? And you need a culture that's willing to give agents room to operate without micromanaging them out of effectiveness. So, this one is not a tech initiative. It's really the most important strategic and operational decision that today's leaders of your organization have to make for the future growth and sustained success of your organization. So I want to close with something I feel strongly about because I see it play out in client conversations all the time. The shift from use case thinking to agentic operating model thinking is not primarily a technology decision. It's a leadership and strategy decision. The retailers who are going to win in the next decade are not going to win because they had the best data scientists or the most sophisticated models. They're going to win because their leadership teams made deliberate choices about what work they wanted humans doing and what work they wanted AI doing, and they built organizations that reflect those choices. That requires leaders to have an opinion about what their company should be in an AI-first world. Not just, we want to use AI to be more efficient. That's table stakes. The real question is, what does it mean to be a great merchant, a great supply chain operator, a great customer experience organization, when AI can handle the cognitive routine work? What do you stand for? What uniquely human capabilities do you want to invest in and elevate? Back to the SVP I mentioned at the beginning. After that conversation, we spent a session together, not listing AI use cases, but mapping what decisions her organization made across every function and asking which ones genuinely required senior human judgment, which ones were complex but could be delegated to well-designed agents, and which ones were frankly just administrative burden that should go away entirely. That conversation changed the framing entirely. It turned an AI roadmap exercise into an operating model redesign exercise. And that's the level of ambition I think this moment calls for. The use case treadmill is real, and the way off it is not to run faster or prioritize better. It's to ask a bigger question. What should work mean in your company? Answer that, and then build or buy accordingly. Thanks for listening. If this episode sparked something for you, a question, a pushback, a situation in your own organization that resonates, I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow the Retail Tales on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to connect with us, if you have a suggestion or a discussion topic, or you would like to suggest a retail AI leader for a conversation, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, Insta, or X, or just visit us at retailtales.ai. But whatever you do, stay in the conversation with us to keep learning a thing or two about retail AI. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay curious.